All right, so we are ready for our first prepared speaker, and that is Mr. Stephan Villavicencio. And Stephan is currently working out of the Connect with Story, excuse me, his pathway is Motivational Strategies, and he is currently working out of the L3 elective Connecting with Storytelling. The title of his speech is Inspiration from Scott Joplin, and in commemoration for African American History Month, our fellow Toastmaster Stephan will be sharing the inspiring story of Scott Joplin, a ragtime pianist who rose to national fame around the year 1900. Again, distinguished guests and fellow Toastmasters, Stephan Villavicencio presenting Inspiration from Scott Joplin. Stephan.
Thank you, Sir Toastmaster and fellow Toastmasters and honored guests. Do you know this song? If you know who wrote this song, you'll know what I'm speaking about today. Scott Joplin wrote The Entertainer, the song that I just played, in 1901. He also published 100 ragtime songs and sold millions of copies. He's considered the king of ragtime. Fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, I'm here to tell you what's so special about Scott Joplin. For one thing, he synthesized ragtime, a new style of music, from two different styles of music, one being European classical music and the other being the blues. He also was a pioneer because he started the industry of publishing music for sale to the general public, and he was very successful with that. But also important, he was a person of virtue. He exemplified patience, perseverance, and forgiveness. He was born in 1868 when railroads and cattle were big business in the Midwest. He grew up in Texarkana, Arkansas. His dad was a railroad worker. His mom was a housekeeper. And he would follow his mom into her place of work where there was a piano, and he would play it. And he was really good, and he even got piano teachers, and when he became a teenager, he got gigs playing in saloons. Now, his first job to make ends meet was to follow his dad's footsteps and work on the railroad. Hard and grueling work. But he would still sneak away and keep practicing the piano. And he kept playing those gigs, and eventually he was able to join a band and was able to travel as far north as Omaha, Nebraska, and as far east as Boston, which was 1,600 miles away. He got a full-time job as a pianist in 1899 in Sedalia, Missouri, which was where there was a big hotel where he worked at. And 5 years later, he published the big hit Maple Leaf Rag, and that one sold 1 million copies. 4 years later, in 1903, he published his first opera, Guest of Honor. It was about Booker T. Washington's visit to the White House. This was supposed to be a great feat for Scott. Unfortunately, it was marred by the manager of the first opera house ran away with the money and was never found. And this crooked individual also took the sheet music and the scores for the whole opera with him. That same year, Scott also encountered other personal problems, the death of his son, his wife leaving him, and the death of his brother. He nevertheless, despite these personal heartaches, he picked himself up by the bootstrap and continued to publish music and drew on the sadness as his inspiration for his music. He eventually moved to New York City in 1907, and 2 years later, after publishing 60 other ragtime songs, he made an opera, a second opera. It was called Treemonisha. It was about an African-American farm girl who fights superstition and voodoo magic and leads her people to freedom through education. Treemonisha would be presented at the Harlem Lincoln Theater in 1915, and Scott was looking forward to having Treemonisha be presented at other big stages throughout the country. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1917 before he was 50 years old. After he died, there was a dip in his popularity. It seemed like Scott Joplin might be obscure for a while, but there were some jazz musicians who picked up his music and played them in 1928 and also in 1940. And finally, in 1970, a new publication was made by Joshua Rifkin. It was the remake of The Entertainer, and it was a big hit that year in 1973. And then Treemonisha was finally shown in the big stages of Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas in 1976. This same year, Scott Joplin received the Pulitzer Prize for his work on Treemonisha. In conclusion, Mr. Scott Joplin utilized his talent and fame to encourage the African American community to strive for education. And he did this in a time when bias was prevalent in the American society. And nevertheless, he persevered despite bias in the society, despite people, despite family members passing away, and despite all the problems that plagued him, he still continued to inspire others and encourage to make good music. I don't know about you, but I'm inspired by anyone who encourages others to do good and do the right thing, even when others are not. Fellow Toastmasters, I propose a toast for Scott Joplin. Cheers. Madam Toastmaster,